Now, I want to introduce some expanding of the notion of Pan-Africanism from its traditional usage. However, it needs to be emphasized that the initial usage of the term is extremely important today because that inter-ethnic conflict, and you've got hundreds of African ethnicities. You have a whole bunch of African ethnicities within the same country. And a lot of that has to do with how the colonizers carved up Africa. But I'm not blaming African disunity on the colonizer, because I'm saying that the only reason you got a colonizer was because of African disunity. We get it backwards. Take that opportunity to challenge folks who talk about capitalism is our main enemy. I'm talking about an enemy that allowed capitalism to develop, the internal enemy. I used to think that it should just be natural for people in the face of foreign threats to draw together with each other across ethnic bounds, but apparently that's not the case. All right? It occurs maybe to some leadership, but we need to set the stage where people have an understanding, not just simply the leadership or a handful of people within the leadership, but a broad mass understanding of a need to be together across ethnic bounds. We're dealing with, in today's news, about Africans killing other Africans who come from someplace else in Africa. We've got significant history of Africans doing horrible things to other Africans, sometimes fighting over diamonds, sometimes fighting over jobs, sometimes fighting over who is going to win an election, sometimes fighting over, we don't even know what we're fighting over, we just know I don't like them, and we killing each other. And that's not very different from when we've had gangs of black young people and not so young people fighting and killing each other over having different affiliations, wanting to control certain turf, or this one feeling disrespected by that one. We need Pan-Africanism in its original sense right here in the United States. But to speak to the expansion of this concept, I want to emphasize that in today's world, the division between ethnic groups is deadly. And sometimes it occurs in not so deadly ways, but still in ways that interfere with our ability to establish a greater degree of coordination among our people. There's a brother that I'm close with who's Haitian, who's got problems with Dominicans unless a particular Dominican specifically declares some loyalty or some allegiance to African people. He don't want to have nothing to do with them. Yet the same brother does not require other Haitians or other English-speaking Africans to declare loyalty to African people, but he's got some bitterness in terms of Dominicans. that's a problem. You've got Africans who are bitter towards other Africans who live in the same country, sometimes in the same cities, in the same towns, sometimes neighbors. That genocidal situation that occurred in Rwanda, where we're not even clear on what the ethnic difference is. Some folks are called Hutu and some folks are called Tutsi, and hardly anybody can give a clear explanation as to what the difference is. But some years back, folks got souped up into one set attempting to kill off the other. So whether it's a murderous kind of sentiment, animosity, or whether it's just I don't like them, I don't really want to deal with them, I don't want to work with them kind of resentment. We need Pan-Africanism, and we need the development of a Pan-African attitude to cut through that resentment. Now, this ain't no magic wand, and damn sure making a video and speaking on it isn't going to correct that overnight. But I want to arm the people who have an understanding that we need to get past a lot of this so that we can do better work in moving larger numbers of people past those kinds of barriers. And hopefully this particular video will help in that regard. Now, I know people having the animosities that we have toward this group or that group have some history to it. I know that folks have done some negative things. I understand that. But we need to understand that many of the things that we do on a large scale level reflect our leadership, reflect our being moved in ways that does not correspond with our long-term well-being. To want to condemn folks today because we have a history of being disorganized. That's what we're doing stuff. We're doing work for, to get organized. When you are disorganized, you get misled. When you are disorganized, you get pulled into bullshit. And I understand, without getting on the interterritorial scale, I could just deal with the housing project that I grew up in and show just how easy it is to be sucked into bullshit based on whoever people are following. It ain't just simply young people that do that. Plenty of old people get sucked into bullshit. We want to talk about resentment. I've got resentment of the tendency for Africans in the history of being in this country to participate with our oppressor in oppressing other people. I would understand it if people are angry with us. They tell me that in places like Vietnam, the closer you got to the front, the darker the troops got. Bob Marley did a song, a whole bunch of us love us some Bob Marley, yet he did a song talking about Buffalo Soldiers. Buffalo Soldiers are Africans in the 1800s in the U.S. government's army while it's continuing to expand, conquering Native Americans. So if some other people today, including Native Americans, were upset with me, I'll understand that. And what I can do, what I am in a position to do today, is I can fight the tendency among us to continue supporting our oppressor in oppressing other people on this planet. That's something that I can work on today, because I'm not working under the leadership of, or lack of leadership, that Africans in the US may have had in the 1800s. I'm working under leadership that knows better. And recognizing the negative history is one thing, being locked into an unproductive point of view and practice is something else altogether. When we talk about African people, this is a clarification that needs to be made often. Because as some of us, as many of us, a good portion of our movement has gotten souped up on the idea that human life begins in Africa. We want to make the whole world African, right? Well, everybody is African, including the Europeans who conquered us, right? Wherever human life originated from, and current anthropological thinking tells us that it's the Great Lakes region of East Africa, that's everybody. And if we want to make African mean everybody, then it loses its political and cultural significance. We're talking about a portion of humanity who is, for the most part, descendant of the branch of humanity that expands to populate the entire mass of that land that we currently call Africa. And I know that there's plenty of folks who don't like the word Africa. I don't care what you call it, an African by any other name. Descendants of the inhabitants of the branch of humanity that populated the whole of Africa, not just coming out of East Africa and spreading throughout other parts of the world, that branch of humanity that spreads out throughout the landmass that we call Africa. And I'm not a sub-Saharan Pan-Africanist. I'm a Pan-Africanist, and that includes North Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, and any place that African people moved to or were taken to. So then certain folks who will deny the African identity of Africans in the north part of Africa. They're not Europeans. They're not East Asians. I know there's a whole bunch of resentment that folks whose origin is more from West Africa or sub-Saharan Africa, I know that there's a lot of animosity towards people that we call Arabs. But there go another term that is highly unclear. What does that mean? I remember looking at stuff going on in Sudan, and folks was talking about Africans, you know, in the south and Arabs in the north, and then I looked at people on both sides of the conflict, and I'm like, they look black to me, right? I understand that folks like identifying with historical labels that seem to be more ascendant. I understand that. Just like I understand Africans messed over in the United States continuously, not just simply enslaved, right? And enslaved for how many years, but continuously messed over, and yet a whole bunch of us love identifying with being American. I understand that. People like to be on what they perceive to be the winning side. You got a small fraction of people who will get on the underdog side and identify with that. But a good portion of people, hell, they want to be with the side that looks like it's winning. I understand that. But I'm also saying that our survival and development is dependent upon us achieving a level of coordination across the geographic differences, across the ethnic differences, across the religious differences. Oh, and some bloody conflict occur in the name of religion. That coordination across the language differences. Our existence on this planet is dependent upon us achieving a higher level of coordination. So I understand your resentment, but we're going to have to work our way through those resentments.